to a show.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Mats podcast. And it's Dante. You know that, though. And today on the podcast, I'm going to have a guest. I'd like to have guests from here in the state of Maryland, mostly teammates, and somebody that I might have just crossed paths with out in the jiu-jitsu community. But it's not too often that I meet someone who actually isn't in Maryland, but they were in Maryland. And then I was like, oh my God, like cousin, we have a connection. So my guest today on the podcast, I would like to welcome Mr. David Riedman. Get it right. And David is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, and also he is the creator of the K through oh my God, I can't talk today. K through 12 school shooting database. And I want to talk with David really about jiu-jitsu and we want to talk about sport jiu-jitsu versus practical use jiu-jitsu and self-defense jiu-jitsu, but also just kind of run the whole gauntlet of conversations. So welcome to the show, David. How you feeling, my friend? And thank you.
Hey, I'm feeling cold. It's freezing. It's Maryland weather in Orlando this week, but pleasure to be on the show, Dante.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you on. And yeah, we got slammed by a storm. Like I saw last week, was like, oh, we're gonna get some snow next Monday. I was like, oh, word. I get the day off from work. Just catch up on life. And then my daughter kicks the door in on Monday morning, doing a happy dance and almost a cartwheel. She can't quite do one, and like there's snow. And I look out the window and there's like close to a foot of snow. I was like, yeah, that's more than I needed. So it looks like our code transferred down to y'all down there in Florida a little bit. It was like, look, let's share the wealth. So hopefully it doesn't get too bad for you.
No, it'll be the 140-degree day of the year, and then it'll be pool weather again by end of the week.
Well, I mean, like I have family down in Dade County, and I'd always thought about moving down there to be near those cousins. And my wife was like, no, I like having seasons. And I was like, that didn't really occur to me. I was just like, I mean, I don't like the snow. So like what are we doing here? And then once she, kind of explained it to me, just like how Maryland is so unique, which I've been here long enough, I should know, but I just, you get spoiled by it. You're just like, it's just, whatever. So
I'll tell you the thing I don't miss about Maryland, and I think about it every time there's one of these cold days, is like so many other people in the DC area. I lived right in Rockville. I was right on the red line, and I train hard. I train a lot of weeknights, and I'd have work the next morning. And working downtown in DC, you're wearing a suit to work every day. So you're wearing suit shoes on the mile walk to the metro. And it would always be one of those mornings where it's like 10 degrees, pavement's freezing, 7 in the morning, it's still dark. And I would have jammed one of my toes from a sprawl last night, or somebody would have stepped on one of my toes. And every one of those steps to the metro in the morning was just agony. And I think that's such a vivid memory that I have of training, of living in Maryland, of the realities of the grind, the pre-COVID grind, that it's when you wake up and it's beautiful Florida day, wearing shorts, wearing a tank top in February. Like that's where it's like, this is a really good quality of life. I've had a lot of steps in the road to get here, but at this point I wouldn't trade it for anything.
One day I'm going to convince my wife, just one day, we got to get out of this cold, because I want to wear a tank top outside in February and January. Like I want to have a good time, but no, we gotta have seasons. Like
I was in the pool after training last night. Like the cold plunge was broken at the club. So took a look at my pool water. It's 60 degrees, but it was only like 50 outside. So Yeah, sat in the swimming pool about 9 o'clock last night in the middle of January. Like, can't beat that.
Uh, they at this point now, I'm just like, you know what? I'm about to go ahead and book a ticket. Let's go down there and chill. My grandparents used to do that every January, right after the Christmas and the New Year family get-togethers. They're like, all right, January 5th, we're heading out to Florida. I need you to come back and take care of the plants.
Hey, it's a
And
lot more than Disney.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Um, so David, for you with your jiu-jitsu journey, where did that start? Like, what got you into training Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that on a flight last week because I knew that was going to be a question that you were going to ask, and it's kind of random. It all started on a flight about actually 16 years ago this month. It would have been January 2009 is when I first got started. But it actually started before then in a way that I didn't even know. So my brother is 4 years younger. And when I was in college, you're not paying attention to what your kid brother's doing anymore. But when he was in 11th grade, he randomly got into jujitsu. And he did really well because when he was a senior in high school, he ended up getting his blue belt at Yamasaki Academy in Rockville. But he's my kid brother in high school, so I'm not really paying attention to it at all. But at some point over that time, I had an iPod video. I'm sure you remember one of those. You probably have one of those.
Still
And
use
I had
mine.
and I had downloaded all of his iTunes library onto it because he had a ton of music. So now fast forward to 2009, I'm on a red eye flight back from Honolulu, and that's a long flight back to DC. It's like an 11-hour flight. So I thought I was going to sleep through it, but about halfway through, I couldn't sleep. I'm scrolling through the iPod, and I see that there's a video on there, and it's like a 2-hour video. So I click on it, and it's Choke. It's the iconic jiu-jitsu movie Choke, and I've got like 6 more hours in the flight. So I'm watching it on that little 2x2 screen on the iPod video, and my mind is just blown. I'm like, what is going on with this? This is like the most inspirational, most empowering video I've ever watched. How do I not know anything about this? Why did my brother have this in his iTunes library? I don't even know. So I watched that like 3 times in a row. So I had 6 hours to watch on the flight, and I just like couldn't get enough of it. So I got back, and it's right after New Year's 2009. I've been doing the Washington Sports Club thing for a while, but I would make myself go lift weights, but I wasn't really interested in it. So I look up on the map Yamasaki Academy, and it happens to be like a half mile from my office in Rockville. So just kind of, I'm like, I watched this Choke documentary. I'm into this. I'm going to go in, do a class, see what it's all about. And from there, I was kind of hooked after the first day.
Nice, nice. Did you play any sports or anything like growing up prior? Did you, because sometimes you get folks that come in and it, they'll have that previous athletic background, and it's kind of like, okay, this is a lot different. And then you have folks who come in who know nothing, but then jiu-jitsu becomes that thing for them.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of things. My sport, which Montgomery County and Maryland is a hotbed of, was swimming. Since I was 5 or 6 years old, I was competitive swimming year round. I did that through high school. Like I could have gone on a college scholarship swimming, but I was just really burned out on it at that point. But I had really good breathing control. I had really good endurance, pretty long frames. So that lent itself really well to swimming. And then I was also a volunteer in the fire department in Maryland, which is, Montgomery County is one of the largest or the largest combination career volunteer fire department in the country. So from, being 16 all the way, through my 30s when I moved away from Maryland, you're doing a lot of really physical stuff in the fire department. You're dragging stuff, you're breaking doors, you're dragging ladders around, you're carrying tools around. So I had kind of the base of good endurance and kind of the swimming is a really mental game. It's more a mental game, I think, than any other sport. And then I also felt really comfortable kind of throwing and moving heavy objects around. So jiu-jitsu just was something that felt right and clicked immediately.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I, I have a when I really think about it, whenever firefighting comes up, it clicks in my head. It's like, I know quite a few firefighters, and when you brought up like the the physicality of it, I started thinking, it's like, yeah, I need to swing over there and talk to my buddies. Was like, hey, like, what are y'all doing? Like, come on over and train. Like,
Yeah, there are a lot of parallels to jiu-jitsu. There are actually a couple guys, really high level jiu-jitsu and MMA practitioners who are paid firefighters in Montgomery County. But there are parallels immediately because people don't realize it, but the air tank that you carry in the fire department doesn't have a lot of air in it. So every one of the breaths that you're taking might be the breath that you need to get out. So even though you're doing really intense activity and your adrenaline's rushing and you're operating in a house fire in a dangerous condition, the entire time you need to be thinking about your breathing and conserving your air and conserving your energy. And that plays so well into jiu-jitsu. Swimming is exactly the same way, where you're in a constant fight because every time you're taking a breath, you're losing that moment of efficiency in your stroke. And so you're constantly fighting against that urge to breathe because you don't actually need to breathe as much as you think you do.
I never even thought of it that way either. I know that's one of the big things at least I try to focus on the mats is, my breath control and I end up in a lot of bad positions, and that breath control is very important, to keep you from panicking and stuff like that. I mean, been doing it long enough now where I'm not necessarily in a panic, but still, you get in a triangle and you got to be calm and escape from that. Also, I have a short, stubby neck, so yeah, that helps a little bit. But the breath control, never even thought, especially when you connect it to swimming, because having the long frame and then having that swimming background and the breath control there. I mean, you're almost kind of custom built for jiu-jitsu, really, at that point.
Yeah, I've been really lucky because I think listening to your podcast, listening to some other jujitsu podcasts, a lot of people come into it later in life, or a lot of people use it as a way to get in shape. And I was just so fortunate to be 23, find a world class academy that's one of the oldest ones in the country, be half a mile from my house, go into that in really good shape at a young age. I mean, 23 is like the prime of your career. And the way that it worked out, I mean, this is 2009, so it's still, your butt is at the desk from 8:30 until 5 every day. Well, I could jet out of that office at 4:45. Nobody's going to notice. And the weekday schedule, there was no gi from 5 to 6. There's fundamentals from 6 to 7, and there was adult advanced from 7 to 8:30. And so a lot of weeknights, I was single then. I didn't have a lot going on. It's not a great kind of mid-entry level job where I'm not making any money then, so I can't go out. I can't do anything fancy. I had nothing to do other than go to jiu-jitsu. And I was lucky to have one of the best academies in the world right next to my office. And I put in, a lot of 3.5 hour sessions multiple nights a week. And I think that's what was able to let me kind of level up so quickly.
Oh, yeah. Having that training split sounds great. No gi at 5 o'clock, like right there, and then you got fundamentals. And it's just like when you look at something like that, it's like, hey, if you don't, like you said, if you don't, have any other outlet, you're not going out, partying, not hitting the bars or nothing. And it's a good, it's a good alternative because, all right, let's go to the bar, spend money, get drunk, get fat, or go to jiu-jitsu, learn a skill, get in shape, build a community. And it's a lot healthier than in mentally and physically than going out there and being a knucklehead. Not that all people that go out to the bars are knuckleheads, but I would say the percentages are a lot higher than not.
Yeah, and the other thing that was just dumb luck, and it was back to me, not never paying attention to your little brother, is everybody at Yamasaki Academy knew him. Unfortunately, right after he got his blue belt, he broke his arm and then he was going to college, so he just fell away from it. But they all remembered him. They all liked him. He was very good. I mean, he got his blue belt within a year from a really high level academy. So immediately, all these guys who he trained with were now kind of the veteran blue belts of the gym, because he was about 2 years ahead of me in that. So all of these guys immediately, were asking, "Where's your brother?" And so I had this instant friend group, because you've got it's like you're credentialed when you walk into a place. If everybody kind of knows your family or knows your lineage, everybody was so welcoming there. And then we developed this core group of people that were there at white and blue belt, kind of leveling up. Got a blue belt within a year, got a purple belt within about a year and a half. And it was this core group of people that we all started around the same time, and we were just pushing and challenging each other without factions. I think that was like looking back on it, a really, really unique opportunity to have a dozen or more people in a really competitive environment where it didn't split off into groups that hated each other. Because I think that can happen in so many environments, especially jujitsu.
Yeah, I think though, having that those groups to grow with and to build with are so important. I remember when I started, there was a handful of us, all white belts, and the ideal was, let's grow together. Let's all hustle, bust our ass. We're going to get to the next rank together. And shortly thereafter, you start seeing the numbers kind of fall off. And there's like two of us that remained, that ended up, we got our blue belts together, and it's kind of like, okay, this is it. But we're still there together now, both still blue belts, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just saw a picture from the winter promotions at Yamasaki, and I think there were about 10 people that were all white belts in 2009, 2010 range, and there was a picture of everybody together. And I wasn't there because I'm in Florida now. But of these 10 or so people, they're all black belts. The last two got their black belts at the last promotion set. So it's like one of those things where if you stick in, if you have the right people, if you have the right environment, it can go a long way in this sport.
Oh yeah, I mean, you push each other, and you're there for each other. You build each other up. Iron sharpens iron. So it's always good to see you know your teammates growing, and you all grow together. One teammate who, his kids were training there, but he wasn't training. He had trained though, and he passed. And then finally he steps on the mats, and he and I are similar, where we're like, I think he's more of a practical joker than I am. Like, and I want to have him on the podcast, but I'm just like, I gotta have a buffer. I gotta have somebody here to kind of keep us on pace. But I got my blue belt. Then about a month later, I think he got his blue belt, and he took off from there. It was just, he's at brown belt now, and he says to me a couple years back, when he was at purple belt, he goes, Dante, like, I'm finally back to training at this point. He was like, Dante, you need to get your purple belt before I get my brown belt. And this bastard gets promoted to brown belt the next week. It was like not that he knew that was coming, but it was still one. It was like, yeah, thanks. That's not how this works, buddy. Like don't, no pressure. But he's still one of those guys that we train with, and we operate as if the rank, it matters, but it doesn't matter. We're still buddies. We still try to help each other grow. We still try to just make sure that it's understood, like, we're here all for the same reason. We're just trying to be better than what we were before. And I think that's important with the team environment. You all know that you're not competing against each other, because like you say, you can get those factions at your gyms, and you'll have one click over there, one click over here, And even though you're all teammates, there's still, that hint of resentment. Like, why do those guys, hang out with those guys, or whatever it may be. So it's good to, like, see the groups growing together, and keeping that family vibe, family feel, if you will.
But it's difficult, and you talk about the belts, and that you're a blue, but your buddy is at brown and whatever, and it's like in your 20s, there's an upward trajectory, like, or the very start of anybody's jujitsu time, there's an upward trajectory. But I think what makes jujitsu so difficult when you're now into late 30s, 40s, that something starts grinding you down after 16 years at this point. It's crazy to think about. It's been like 16 years of
Yeah.
this, is that at the start you've got this linear path straight up where you just have limitless potential to get better. But then there's a point where you hit where actually things start going down. I mean, you can still be training hard, you can still be working hard, but all of a sudden you're not as good as you were before. But the belt progression is that if I'm purple belt, I better be better than the blue belts consistently. If I'm a brown belt, I better be better than all the purple belts, including that 25-year-old that comes visiting the gym. When you're a black belt, you're defending your gym, your name, the reputation, your instructor. But you're doing that at a point where expectations keep going up, but your skills and ability are going down. And I love the NFL, and I was just thinking about this the other day watching the Manning cast, and they were joking, Eli and Peyton. They were showing like Peyton in his last season as he tried to, there was like a botched handoff, and he tried to sneak, and he can't move, and you know in his last year, Peyton couldn't throw more than 10 yards. He couldn't scramble even in his last couple of years. But at his prime, he probably had the best season. His MVP season is probably the best single season any quarterback's ever had.
Yep.
But if that was jujitsu, you'd measure the last year of Peyton against his ability. You think of like Eli beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. That would be like, blue belt beats coral belt, and everybody's going to have 1,000 comments about that online. But it's jujitsu. It doesn't work the way you have this linear progression when your skills in every physical sport are something that takes an arc that goes up and comes back down.
So when you're also, starting off earlier in your career, especially at a younger age, it's almost like at white belt, you don't know what you don't know, but there's still a lot to grow. You're obtaining all these skills and all this knowledge, and it's like, yes, and it's like as you start climbing up as well, it's like it becomes not harder, but it's like, I guess from my point of view, where I always struggle is like, I know the things. It's just putting the things together. And it almost feels like, well, when I was white belt, it was like all these other things that I was learning, and I felt like I was obtaining all this knowledge. And now at blue belt, it's like I have all this knowledge, but I want to learn more. And it's like, well, you've learned quite a bit. Why don't you put to use the knowledge that you have? And I always kind of look at it that way too, with that learning in the beginning versus as you start moving along that path. It's like the it the fruit gets higher on the tree, I guess, to grab onto. Uh, and that's also something you see, when you're making the Peyton Manning comparison there with his MVP season. We all, reflect back on that because that was a great year where he threw like 50 touchdowns and
Yeah,
5,000
4,600
yards.
yards. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
It's
nobody's
like it
done
was crazy. And when you look at MMA and jiu-jitsu, it's almost kind of a matter of what have you done for me lately.
that. Mm-hmm.
But I think also with that, well, more so MMA, is you have people who, like Peyton, retired and he knew it was time. But you have fighters and even grapplers who, when we're in our 40s, we're like, I can hang with these 20-year-olds.
Well, that's Aaron Rodgers right now. I mean, that's the guy that had some injuries, has a lot of other life distractions. His mind isn't in the game anymore, but he's still out there with a black belt with a couple stripes.
Yeah.
And that's why everybody's so hard on him because, if you're a black belt and you have a couple stripes and every single blue belt in the gym is tapping you out, people are judging you by who you are today. They're
Hmm.
not looking back and saying you were Super Bowl MVP. And I think part of that is, jujitsu is informal, and jujitsu you move around. Nobody at my gym in Orlando knows what I was like when I was a 25-year-old purple belt, and I was a hell of a lot better then than I am now. But yeah, it's exactly it's all you have is who you are right now, and that's not how sports work like in any other capacity.
No, they there was just a video on Instagram that I saw, and it was praising, Aaron Rodgers and in the greater part of his career, when he won the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, what is he? He's a 4-time MVP winner, you know. So it's like, we're there's this highlight video, kind of lifting him up on that. And me as a Detroit Lions fan and watching this dude torch the Lions for years, I was like, man, fuck, fucking video out of here. I don't want to see that. I want to see Aaron Rodgers crumble on the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, you know, greatness, he's proven that he can be great. He was great. I mean, can he still do it now? I mean, him at 41, I believe, still out there on the field playing, I mean, is great in itself. But when you're doing the comparison to what's out there on the field with him right now, I mean, you're seeing Bo Nix, you know, throwing for 4 touchdown passes, and Jaden Daniels going off. You got these rookies
Yeah, and
playing.
that's what it's like, being a 40-year-old grappler against some guys that came right out of Division I wrestling or
Oh
whatever
yeah.
else. Like the difference is like we are still putting ourselves on the line. We're
Yeah.
still the quarterback going out on the field, even even past our prime, doing it for nothing except our own pride, which probably puts even higher standards on it.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's just if I could reinvent jujitsu from the start, I would get rid of the belt thing. There wouldn't be a belt. Belts don't make sense in almost any ways or sports because if you have a hierarchy that's going up, you've got to account for when it starts diminishing, for when it starts coming back down. And I mean, think about the if the league MVP, if Steph Curry had a black belt, then when he has a bad shooting night, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's garbage. He came out. Look at who he lost to in this tournament. And we it's the a belt creates unrealistic expectations of of who you are kind of day to day.
Yeah, I think, going along with that, I think it hinders you a little bit, because again, as a blue belt or a purple belt, and you get a D1 wrestler coming in, yes, he's got grappling experience, but not jujitsu experience, and he comes out there and he's giving you fits,
Oh yeah.
and,
Yeah,
and
and
then you
there's
start
a there's a
questioning.
guy in his mid 20s at my gym now. Doesn't drink. He's Polish. He trains every single morning, every single night class. Doesn't do anything else, and he mops the mat with me every single time. But it's like, man, if 25-year-old me could be here, maybe we'd have a shot. But that messes with my mind because I put myself in one place, and it's really hard not to be in that place, even when there's somebody who's in a completely different circumstance.
I've questioned myself at times when I get manhandled by the wrestlers in our no gi class, and I'm just, I'll come home and I know, my skill, but there are times where I just sit here. I'm like, man, oh, coach doesn't look back at that video because I made some silly mistakes. Just, and it's not, not even to say like, oh well, I've been doing this for this long, I should be this much better than these guys. I mean, again, when you point out, the one teammate, he's grinding all the time and he doesn't drink, he doesn't party. It's like a lot of these wrestlers that are coming in on Friday nights. I mean, they're coming in on a Friday night to do jiu-jitsu. So clearly they're not out partying. They're, improving their craft. So for me to think, man, like maybe I should be demoted. It's like that's not true, but there are times where I know I sit there and question myself sometimes. Like, man, this guy's whipped my ass. But yeah, if this was 10 years ago, it's like when I came into the sport, and I wasn't training all the time, but I was coming in like, off of football, lifting weights, I had muscles coming out of my teeth. And it's like, oh yeah, this is about to be a bad day for all of you. I got choked, by my t-shirt, but I didn't know any better. But the thing is, once I start figuring it out, I was, those guys too, just grinding. But yeah, as you start to age, you're like, okay, well, like you said, what, we're really doing this just really for our pride, as we, go out there and butt heads with them. Also, too, I don't know if it's a pride thing with me. If somebody says, "Hey, Dante, you want to roll?" I don't know. I'm just that guy that's like, okay, sure. Like, I was just going to stretch a little bit, loosen up my back. But I mean, if you need a dance partner, let's do it. And then I get folded up. It's like, thanks. You stretch my back out for me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean that's the other tough thing that I think I didn't realize. It's so different from being almost 40 compared to mid 20s. Is I was over at one of my buddies' house during COVID. He built a whole wrestling gym in the shed in his backyard. So it's really fun environment. And we went over there and wanted to work on something, and I just kind of bent down too quickly, and I just felt this pinch in my neck, and then I couldn't turn my neck for like 3 days after that. So it's so different because that's not even on your radar,
Mm-hmm.
in your 20s, that like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get down to show somebody this half guard pass, and just jumping into that too fast without being warm enough is something like you're gonna feel for a week.
Right before we started recording, I just put some CBD drops in my drink because my neck was killing me. Snow day, so go out there, play with the kid in the snow a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean like 10 minutes. I was like, all right, this is enough. But then my neck started feeling funny. I was like, oh no, this isn't good. Came down here, you know, took some drops real quick, and then like right now, I actually feel pretty good. But the thing is like I still need to, work on stretching, mobility. Because I've never been the guy to stretch ever. Like football, I only stretch because we're doing like team stretching. And I was like, oh, okay, this is cool, but I, I don't think I need this. And then once I got out of that environment, I was like, oh, I don't really need to stretch. I'm still pretty limber. Started doing jujitsu, and I was still pretty limber. Like, but the problem comes like once I get home. I was like, okay, well, let me go ahead, hop in the shower. After the shower, who knows? Sit down, read some comic books. And it's like, why my hamstring tight? That doesn't feel good. There's the left shoulder and there's the back. So, that's that unexpected thing. I guess we were probably warned about as we are younger. Like, be sure to stretch. It's like I'll be all right. And then once we hit our 40s, it's like, oh, I probably should have stretched.
Well, I mean, this was, I would say, when I pinched my neck recently. That was at my buddy's house. We're just kind of going right into it. But something I learned from the start with jujitsu that I think some schools that I've gone to just don't really pay attention to is how much time you need to dedicate to warm up. I remember something Fernando Yamasaki taught like very early was you should not touch any other person until you're actively like dripping with sweat. That's the amount of warmth that your body needs to have before you're ready to do kind of any physical contact. So, fortunately it's post COVID. So, I can work from home. I set my own schedule and so on. I go to the gym at least a half an hour before class starts to have half an hour where I can do my own warm up before we're even going into the class warm up. Because doing cartwheels and shoulder rolls and back handsprings and low crawls and salamanders and all of that. If you've been sitting in an office chair all day, your body's not going to be ready to do that. So I take, half an hour of stretching, moving, lunges, jumping, walking out, yoga poses, and so on. But I also understand that's not realistic for everybody, because to get to the gym at 5:30, got to leave my house, by 5. And then I like to train for really a minimum of 2 hours. But if it can be a third hour, I'm good with that too. I like longer sessions. I really start to feel like I'm getting into it, in that second or third hour. Well, now you've got a huge time commitment, because like you're gone from the house from 5 until 9 in the weeknight just for a workout session. So I understand that's not realistic for everybody, but you gotta spend time getting warm. And I think so many gyms have gotten away from doing a really purposeful jiu-jitsu movement warm up, that all that's doing is setting people up to get hurt.
One of the gyms, well, not too local, but out in Virginia, Shark Pit MMA. I know their schedule. They have a yoga class a couple times a week, for their students. And I train at Crazy 88 out in Severna Park. We have an Elkridge location, and the warm ups kind of vary depending on who's running the class. But the classes that I really really enjoy are the ones where our warm ups are movement drills that we're going to be, you know, incorporated into the technique for the day. So if we're doing like our Friday class, it's a wrestling class. It's no-gi, but it's mostly takedowns and wrestling. Warm ups are like penetration steps, down the mat. Um, you know, uh, um, uh, a lot of different wrestling movements, and then hand fighting. To kind of like lightly like move around, warm up. Our Saturday class, we do some light grip fighting to kind of get our hands loosened up, because we're in the gis, and we you know you go in there without doing anything for your hands, and then you start like grabbing lapels and sleeves, and then by the end of the class you're like, oh man, my hands are burning, which I remember those early days not doing that, and then coming home and just putting my hand in ice because they're just burning so much. Now my hands feel pretty good just because of that grip fighting in the beginning. I do think it's important to have a warm up that's the movements that you're going to be doing versus you have some places you want to definitely get your heart rate up. There are just some places are like, do these movements, jumping jacks, push-ups, stuff like that, which aren't terrible, but probably not, my body's not going to be moving in that way on the mats, versus our forward rolls or backward rolls, shrimping, even stuff like that. But it's super important to make sure you're properly warmed up, and again, stretch afterwards, stretch before. Stretching is the key to life.
Yeah,
Even
and
doing yoga.
also, making sure that the warm up is logical, and that the warm up connects to what you're going to be doing in the class.
Mhm.
Because I think that's where I've been to some academies where it's a random blue belt or purple belt is going to do the warm up, then the instructor comes out, the black belt comes out after the warm up, and then they go into whatever they're doing. Those things should all be cohesive. I mean, if you're going to work on takedowns, your warm up should be shots and lunges and reverse lunges and footwork, and you can do 20 minutes of that for a workout. If you're doing a closed guard technique, you should be walking on your hands backwards, walking on your hands sideways, rolling sideways, doing bolos, doing shoulder rolls, because those are every one of the things that's going to open your back up and get you aligned to the movements. Like if you're walking on your hands, you're playing guard with the floor, and what you have to do is connect those things together, and then people get it. And there's one gym I just went to for a minute, and there wasn't any warm up there at all. And I said, well, there are some people that don't really like it. They just want to come in here, take it easy. whatever else. It's like, no, this is a physical sport. Like
Yeah.
we got to get into this. We got to get, mentally and physically ready before you can't go right into doing, some armbar drill. Like somebody's arm's going to get ripped off. Like I've had so many injuries from this sport. The majority of them were something where I can kind of trace back to either wasn't warmed up, wasn't hydrated, wasn't in the right mindset, or didn't kind of think about the situation. And I mean, that sucks because I've missed so much time with injuries and surgery, and it's been a tough road.
Yeah, that's, just hearing that there's a gym that didn't do any warm-ups just made me cringe, like, oh my God. like what was the injury rate there? Because you, even though, like, again, like I said, I'm not really one for stretching. Well, I am now, but I wasn't. You still got to get your body loose. You still got to warm up, at least get your heart rate up. um it's always fun when we're doing movements that I know I don't like bear crawls and the crocodile crawls and stuff, the Spider-Man crawls or whatever. It's like I go into it, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. But after you get done doing it, I feel good. I'm like, oh, I'm glad we did that. And I need to do this more because it's like that initial get your body into it, get your mind into it. But once you're doing it, it's like, okay, you know, now I feel good. I feel fluid. I feel the movement. And even again with the wrestling, we're not doing any takedowns just yet, but we're still working, different movements in those warm-ups. And that's just super duper important because if not, yeah, you're gonna end up destroying your body way early. And yeah, we have a lot of younger guys in there, that are a little bit more limber, but still, and a lot of these guys on the wrestling team, they know, they don't, their wrestling coaches don't let them do anything without a proper warm up and drilling. So when they come to our gym, they're already built for it, they're already ready for it. And some of them, even after we finish our warm up, there's kind of that in between where it's like, go get a drink. Coach might say, doing any additional stretches before we, go into technique. Those kids are already over there, like warming up or stretching and everything. So they, you know, they got the key to it. They know the importance. And I think, we all just need to understand it and stick with that and make sure we keep our bodies intact for it.
Yeah. And then just, I mean, the reality, and I think a lot of people don't realize it when they sign up for jiu-jitsu, or, you go through, a couple months or years or so on, and you kind of dodge the bullet, but injuries are going to happen. Bad injuries are going to happen, and they're going to be, in some cases, completely random. And I mean, that's what sucks about it, is you can go from 1 second you're totally fine to like you're booking an appointment with the ortho surgeon for the next day, and it's rough. But you need to realize that too. Like I think a wake up call for me, it was 2 years ago. I was training pretty easy session, uh, going with a guy, a black belt I trained with a ton. It's like 30 seconds left on the clock, and I had a top half guard, kind of old catch wrestling, kind of cradle that I'd hit a couple times, because when a guy tries to get deep half, you can just catch his head, go into a cradle, shoot your hips out, fly around. And I really wasn't even thinking. And he ducked that deep half guard. I hit that, but he'd known that I'd gotten his back off that before. So he immediately exploded up, and I just felt a pop in my shoulder, and I thought it was just a stinger. But yeah, my bicep and pec were torn just out of nowhere. And I mean, that was a bad injury. But that made me realize, like, you got to take these sessions a little more seriously in planning for what goes wrong, because, like, you're traveling somewhere for work for 2 days, and you're getting in early in the afternoon. Maybe I'll check out a session somewhere, but I've got a meeting I need to be at tomorrow. A lot of people would just randomly go get a session in, but that's something I don't feel comfortable doing now, because first, are you going to potentially miss your work meeting? And then how are you going to manage if you're in another city, without any of your resources or family or whatever, and you have a catastrophic injury that happens in a second, and you've got to figure out how to get a flight, how to get a doctor. It's hectic enough trying to schedule emergency surgery. Like, I think we do need to take some time and realize like how serious like this sport really is.
Mm-hmm. And there's a gym I visited back late summer, and one of the things I liked that they did is that I was new there, just visiting, so I knew two guys there. That's why I stopped in. But speaking with the head coach there, he was like, "Well, look, anyone new stopping in before you roll with anybody in the class during our sparring rolls, we ask that you roll with the black belt, just so we can get a feel for you, make sure you're not chaotic or anything." And I was like, "That's fine. I get it. I completely get it and respect it, because you know I've seen some situations where you get someone come in, you know." Just on like a drop in, and they think it's the Coliseum. They're going for gold, and it's like, dude, like I'm just trying to close out the last round here. I didn't want to sit out. uh, and sometimes I know, what was it, like a month ago? Yeah, about a month ago, when we were sparring, everyone that I tapped hands with, I just told them, like, if there's something you're working on, go ahead. We're just gonna flow today. Do what you need to do. I'm going to defend. Like, I like, there's no need to go crazy. I think those are important sessions to have too, and understanding and agreements. I need to slow down. I'm trying to talk too fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, just you want to stay safe, whether it's at your home gym or you're visiting, whatever it may be. I know whenever I visit a gym, I try to initiate the fact that, hey, I'm moving at like 60%, just so you don't have to go 90. I understand we're both going 60, and at no point will I go above the 60. I also think, just too, as just being a guesser, it's like, I want you to know, I mean, no harm. Like, please just go light. um for the grappling, though, I know one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about was like, uh sport jiu-jitsu, or I guess, yeah, sports jiu-jitsu versus, like, the practical use of jiu-jitsu and grappling in a self-defense type scenario. So, um how does that vary, from where you're standing, between the two?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to who you train with and what their mentality is and what they want to get out of it. Because what really kind of changed my outlook on jujitsu in the last couple of years is one of my buddies here in Orlando. He was the SWAT commander for one of the local police departments. He's a black belt. He had some MMA fights, but he's like me. I'm 39. He's early 40s. So we're kind of in that taking it easier range. But in the taking it easier, he wants to always be focusing on every position is applicable to MMA, no gi jiu-jitsu. Every single position is something that you're keeping yourself safe if somebody's fighting. Every single thing is giving you, multiple options to go different directions. And I think that, like, that, what kind of drives me crazy about sport jiu-jitsu is how artificial a lot of the parts of it are. Like, yeah, you go to this guard. If somebody wants to punch you, like, they're gonna turn your face into a hamburger. Like, if you dive for this deep half, like, somebody is gonna absolutely pummel you. Thinking about your hands, thinking about where you're gonna throw, thinking about where you're positioning your body, and those things actually translate really, really well to keeping yourself safe in regular jujitsu. I think it's either when I was a blue belt or had just gotten my purple belt. I was in a Saturday session. It was pretty chill. there's like summertime, so the mat was getting kind of slick, and I was playing guard, and I kind of dove my head in just as somebody was doing like an aggressive pass, and their foot slipped out, and they just connected like knee right to my temple, and it was like I've had a bunch of concussions, but that was one of the worst. Like crawl to the shower, and they're like different color beams like coming out of the shower head
Mm.
at you. And then I was working on a government project then where I had a laptop that this was like the old school technology where it was an encrypted hard drive that I had like the first digits, and then you look at this key card to get the other digits.
Yeah.
Um, so I I've been using this laptop for like 2 years, and so I went back into work after that session. That happened on like Saturday. I go into work on Monday morning, and I go to log into my computer, and I don't know the digits anymore. Like
Mm.
that concussion had just knocked the digits from my computer out of my brain, and the way technology was with the encrypted hard drive, like that computer was gone, and everything on it was gone.
Well,
But back to like what we're saying about sport versus self defense or MMA jiu-jitsu is you would always have a hand up by your face. You know, you're always thinking about blocking. You're always thinking about a kick. You're always thinking about a punch coming in. And if you're in that in every position, it completely changes the way that you're thinking about the way that you frame, the way that you position yourself, the way that maybe it's an elbow that's making space and your hands connected to your forehead rather than pushing out, with a straight frame. And so just that change in mentality, if you're always thinking in every setting, I've got to protect myself from a punch, then all of your body position is going to be different. And that can help you avoid injury, I think, in a lot of situations.
I think when Eddie Bravo introduced combat jiu-jitsu, that started opening up a lot of folks' eyes as well. And that was an interesting way to kind of change the sports jiu-jitsu uh, landscape a little bit, because you got to factor in for getting hit. You know, if you're trying to, set something up, from the bottom, if you're trying to set something up from your guard, and then somebody's raining shots down on you, that's real life. If you're in the street, if you're in a street fight and you pull guard, I think you've already made a drastic mistake
Oh
already.
yeah, that's
Probably,
not going to end well. But
you
it's also,
probably shouldn't be there.
yeah, but the things should all be a cohesive system that kind of come together. Because I mean, takedowns are hard.
Mhm.
Takedowns, if there are two people who are both doing, strictly gi jujitsu, and you both know how to defend, you both know how to sprawl, you both know how to break grips, like getting a takedown is really hard. But if I throw a right at you and make you duck and come up, but that's a feint, and I'm actually going to shoot a shot, then that's something where like you have an element where things connect together. Um, Not that I'm any good at that either, but I think that it's just like the idea of points, the idea of working towards a time, like, oh, I'm up in points, so I'm just gonna, stall this out for 2 minutes. The whole construction of like, oh yeah, you're gonna get 3 points for this or 2 points for this, but maybe we'll get into this weird 50-50, but I let you up to take you back down because now that's three. It's like, what are we playing towards points, or are we playing towards having a functional system of defense? Because if you play towards points too much, like you turn into the NBA. Like I don't
Yeah.
I don't want to watch a game with 100 3-point attempts. Like analytics show that's the best thing to do. It's your highest degree of winning. It's your easiest way to score. It's boring, and it's not something that like gets people's blood going. I just think jujitsu should be functional, and if something's not functional in kind of every aspect in every setting, kind of is it worth your time to really learn something that's just for fiction?
Yeah. I have one of my coaches. He also coaches Muay Thai, and he's always, trying to, explain to us how, at the very least, come learn some basic, like, you know, stand up, you know, whether it be defending, whether it be throwing a punch, throwing a kick, not, you can't just rely strictly on jiu-jitsu, especially if you're doing it from the perspective of, point fighting. If you're trying to, um, like you said, I'm gonna let you back up, just take you back down to get, to get my points. But we already know, like, taking someone down is hard, you know, whether they, whether they, grapple or fight or not, getting somebody down to the ground is still difficult work for the most part. Um, it, I don't know. I mean, we've come, into this weird world now of martial arts where a lot more people are doing jujitsu, but now it's starting to turn into just that, just the point fighting, where you can sit in a comfortable position without the fear of getting punched in the face or kicked or anything. Whereas, you know, if this is a real world scenario, there's so many different outcomes, whether it be, they've got a weapon, whether, they themselves know how to at least wrestle and get you to the ground now. What if you're the kind of fighter that's like, oh well, I'm so used to stalling. Like, I've got my points and I'm just going to hang out here. And like, no, they're going to start punching you in the face a whole lot, and you're probably going to go out.
Yeah, training with a prop weapon, I think, is also like one of the most useful things that you can do in jujitsu, because aside from being something that's really functional, it makes you completely rethink your game. Like when all of a sudden, I published an article a couple of weeks ago on Substack around just some basic drills that you can do with a gun, where you have a loose gun, you have one partner has the gun in their belt, they're trying to defend it, the other person's trying to take it away. You go back and forth on rounds like that, and the first couple rounds, the only thing that you're going to be thinking about is that gun, and you're going to forget everything you know about jujitsu, because suddenly it's, oh, I've got to have two hands on this, I've got to have one hand on this, I've got to be controlling, and you forget everything that you know about spacing and position and control in different points and passing. It just all goes out. So every time you can introduce or play with something that makes you kind of work back through your original principles, it's going to start sharpening all those parts of your game. And it's going to, like, it deals with the monotony of it too. Like it can, jujitsu is fun, but like if you do it a lot and you do it with the same people, the fun level, flattens out at some point. So I think you've always got to come up with ways to keep challenging yourself, to keep like thinking of ways to make the training like fun and engaging again. And I mean, that kind of comes to what you introed at the start. Is my main area of research is, it's really dark and depressing, but it's school shootings. I've been studying that for 7 years now, trying to understand everything possible about who, what, where, when, and why of school shootings. But where this kind of connects to this conversation, and what I reached out to you about initially, is there's this thought that let's just put more armed people into schools, and if there are more armed people, then you can kill somebody. If a shooting starts, the reality is the shootings are really rare. But now what you have is lots of armed people in all of these spaces, where in schools every day there are fights. In schools every day there are kids that are having disciplinary issues, mental health issues, suicide crisis, behavioral problems, tons of special education kids around the country. If all of a sudden you have people that have guns, but they don't have any training, they have never done jujitsu, they've never done any martial arts, they have no sense of body control, they have no sense of body position, they don't know anything about how to defend a deadly weapon that they're carrying, we're actually going to create a much more dangerous situation for students than we ever had before.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I've always wondered, when that started coming up, It's like, let's arm the teachers. Okay. Are those teachers trained in any way, not just with a weapon? Because sure, you can know how to shoot, but like you said, if a scuffle breaks out. So I have a friend who's a teacher up in the Bronx, and he had, like, when this topic started coming up, he had explained a situation of, like, they all have walkie talkies there, and one of the teachers in the chaos, the student got a hold of the walkie talkie, and he was like, now put a gun in that situation. You have to have, there's so much that goes into it. When you uh you know started thinking about, um kind of connecting the two, the practical use of self-defense in jiu-jitsu, and training and everything, you know did that kind of lead you to, um the K through 12 um system, or was this already something that was kind of already, like, you're thinking about, and then you realize, like, wait a minute, I also have this knowledge as well, and you have to understand these practical uses of body control.
And they've really been completely separate. Most of my professional life has been in homeland security, emergency management, kind of major disaster response. And then I was at a program that was like a think tank of people from across different homeland security disciplines who were thinking about what are all of the issues that the country is going to face in the next generation, the next 10 years. And in the midst of this program, the Parkland shooting happened. And that was a time where I realized I had been in this homeland security space for more than a decade, and we'd never talked about school shootings as a homeland security issue. So I just wanted to know everything about that topic, because before 2018, you couldn't definitively say, were there more shootings this year than last year? Were the characteristics of them changing? The characteristics of the perpetrators changing? Are the tactics changing? All of these basic who, what, where, when, and why that you would want to know about any crime, about any social problem, there wasn't any data that existed on that. So all of the policy decisions that were being made, all of the security funding that was going into fortifying schools and so on, was just being based on people's guesses. There was absolutely no kind of objective information about that. And then as I've been working on that for the last 7 years now, it starts to connect in other places. So it's really been in the last 2 or 3 years that there's been this push to arm more teachers in schools. That really ramped up in the last year. And so I've been trying to think about ways to connect with more people to talk about that we need to think about these problems more than on the surface. If you're a really linear, simple thinker, it's there's a school shooter, give the closest adult a gun, closest adult kills school shooter, problem solved. But that's not the way that complex problems work. You have all of these different dimensions. So I want people to really be thinking about what's risk, what is either increasing or decreasing the risk for a student any given day, any given place, with any of these situations within a school. And then I have my own podcast where I talk exclusively about this topic, but I've had teachers and school administrators and school police officers and so on the podcast talking about how they just get thrown into situations that people haven't thought about all of the consequences that come from that. So with this piece on armed teachers, is we in general need to think about all of the responsibility that goes into carrying a gun. You have to be able to defend it. You have to be able to keep track of it. You need to be able to use it effectively in a highly chaotic situation where you're not able to see straight. And if you don't put intense time and effort into each one of those steps, then you're probably going to be in a situation that is far worse than if you didn't have that gun at all. So I just want to kind of bring some sense to this, because that a teacher who's just handed a gun and goes to an 8-hour training session, that's like a first day white belt. And you don't want a first day white belt in a classroom full of kids when there's a bang in the hallway. It is not going to turn out well for anybody. And people within the jiu-jitsu community understand how much time, how much effort, how much dedication it takes to be able to slow situations down, to be able to learn how to control yourself in high adrenaline, intense situations, to learn how to control and defend your body against other people. And I think the people making policies don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I always feel like there are people that are making decisions, or not even necessarily making, but like looking at it and have a hand in the decision that don't quite, they're not on the ground level. They don't see it from there. They're just looking at make the problem go away. It's like, well, what's your suggestion for making the problem go away might make the problem bigger. Like, we got to attack it from the ground. Um, in even thinking about, the ideal of arming teachers, in my mind, I'm always wondering, it's like, well, you know, who all gets a gun? What teachers get a gun? You know, um, it's just, like the protection of the gun in the classroom or wherever it may be. How guarded is that? You know, it's in. I don't know. I also feel like too, kids are observant of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they catch on. They find out, oh, there's a gun in my classroom. My teacher has access to that gun. You know, or at least it's nearby. There's just all these little things that I think about. It's like, because I know
Oh,
the school.
kids know the school better than any adult. I mean,
Yeah.
I still think I know my high school probably better than any of the teachers there did. We knew every spot in that building. We knew every
Hmm.
way in and out of that building. There was nothing that was going to stop us from getting anywhere. It was an old school, and there in the auditorium there was a ladder that went up to this booth to control like the stage lights and stuff. And the ladder, had a locked cage and so on. But if you leaned an 8-foot table up against it and used the table like a ladder, you could get over that cage. There'd be 20 students sitting up there, like cutting it up in this booth between classes. You could do whatever you want because there's no teacher who's going to like scale a table and climb a 30-foot ladder to get up into that booth. But like, there's no place in a school that's safe from the students because it's the student space. And that's, I think, what we've done is we've taken a lot of agency away from the students. And I mean, this is another thing that it's not going to happen, but it would be great if it did. If every school had a jiu-jitsu program, you wouldn't have a lot of these problems to start with. You wouldn't have the bullying, you wouldn't have the conflicts, you wouldn't have a lot of the interpersonal issues, not just for students, but for staff also. Most school staff members, if they were training on a regular basis, if they were confident in themselves, if they were confident in their ability to communicate, to project strength, to be assertive, they wouldn't want to have a gun. Or maybe they would feel inclined to talk to and engage with that student that they're scared of before you'd ever get to the points of conflict. So I think that what we've done is we've taken, again, these very linear, here's one problem, here's one solution, we can make a line from A to B. We're just going to do that because it's simple. But when you've got complicated problems that involve lots of people in lots of spaces in different circumstances, the ways to solve those problems are going to be complicated, time-consuming, unconventional solutions. And that's like, what was it with like Snoop Dogg and those guys where they locked all the Bloods and Crips in the gym, overnight, and you're going to play basketball to work out the issues. Like we've just forgotten some of the simplest stuff. Like jiu-jitsu was created to equalize street fights in Sao Paulo 100 years ago. Let's not take things to escalate violence, to escalate deadly situations. Let's go back to some basics that might help people.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I've always thought about, my wife homeschools our daughter, and when we talk about PE, we talk about PE a lot. Actually, it's like it's just one of those things that it seems like, any kind of physical movement in school. Period. You get recess, for 30 minutes. This is like elementary up through middle, I guess, and then you get PE for a semester, maybe. So there's not a lot of movement. And I've brought up the idea just in conversation talking with her. I was like, I think, they should have like something with jujitsu and not watered down, because how it gets, in the schools. It's like, all right, we're just gonna kind of breeze through this because we know half of you don't want to do this, so we're just gonna just bear with us, and let me get my work done, and then the kids end up learning nothing, and that's super unfortunate. I was in middle school in Delaware, and I remember we had a chapter on wrestling. I guess our PE coach, or they might have had a wrestling coach actually come in, because we spent a lot of time on that. And just thinking about that, it's like if you have something with jujitsu like that for the students, somebody that's doing it and cares and actually wants to get this accomplished, because you know if the students are doing well with it and look good, and it reflects great on the teacher,
Yeah.
versus they go out there
And
and they look
people are
like shit
doing
and they
that.
don't want to do it.
Yeah, people are doing that in a small scale, but it's just
Hmm.
not institutionalized. Like think of Carlos Riba with Guardian in Baltimore.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a gym where we're going to have kids and we're going to get them into this environment. They can be on scholarships, so they're not going to have to pay for it. And when they're in an after school program where they're going to have a study hall, they're going to have a meal, they're going to have training, they're going to have structure, they're going to interact with adults. Those kids are probably not going to be out causing problems like ever in their lives because they're given the structure and way to do it. Unfortunately, like I said, this would be a great thing to happen, for every student and every teacher and every staff member to be, training would probably solve a whole lot of our problems, but it's not going to happen. Like you were talking about
no,
doing some wrestling in middle school. I remember in high school, the PE teachers got an indoor hockey set, and I had first period gym, and it was the brand new hockey sticks and goals and everything. We had that set up, and by midway through first period, there was a girl missing a tooth, and a guy his finger was facing the wrong direction from a. There were no gloves; there were just sticks,
of course.
and that stuff went in the closet, and it never came out again. But but it was really fun for about 25 minutes. So unfortunately, like that's why this won't happen. Like this is a brutal sport. I mean, I've had three different injuries that I've missed almost a year from. Um, we know concussions are bad. That you end up with a lot of that in jiu-jitsu just from bad luck over time. Like our parents, our school administrators, are the lawyers going to let this happen? Probably not, but we can still dream and say like there are better ways. There's probably a better solution than giving a teacher a gun for the purpose of killing a kid. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
harsh reality of it. So
Yes.
if we can go to that extreme, like maybe we can try out the other extreme of having everybody sweat a little bit and wrestle each day.
I mean, I think that's a point though that you brought up too, is like the lawyers, because that's with jujitsu, you got to sign this waiver, just in case. You never know. But that's always the hiccup in the road, is like, oh, well, we got to now draft out all the possible things that could go wrong, and if there's like even one, they're like, well, we shouldn't do this. I feel like though there is a way to teach this, and especially if you start up younger too. Because I had a friend on here who's a state trooper. We talked about uh, police officers learn jujitsu, and it's like, well, if you start it now with the new recruits, you got the folks that are already in there. Sure, they're where they are. If they want to come back and learn jujitsu, so that way they're safer on the streets, awesome. But everyone else coming in now, you have to learn it. And, maybe if, from those earlier ages, okay, this is what we're doing. And then as you go up, they've already kind of got it instilled. You go to the next level, and now you're learning the next level of things still safely. There are injuries that can occur, but again, you know, taking your time getting to there. There's got to be a way. It's just there's always
Yeah,
that
there's some
hiccup of
good
like,
peer reviewed. There's some good peer reviewed research out there on police officers and formal BJJ training that they have a lower rate of times when they pulled their service weapon. They have a lower rate of citizen complaints for use of force, and they have a lower rate of both officer and citizen injury. And I mean, when you think about it, it gets overlooked in the cost. But if police arrest someone, they don't know what they're doing, somebody gets shot, somebody gets beaten down, it's the taxpayers that are going to pay, a couple $100,000 or $1 million settlement for this. It's the same way with the school. Somebody gets shot in the school, there's going to be a multi-million-dollar settlement, whether it's an accident, whether it's intentional, whether it's a planned attack, whether it's a domestic that happened, in the drop-off line of the school. Like, there are going to be some $1 million settlements out of this. So what we need to think about is ways to take some unconventional approaches, some approaches that are really low cost, and say, like, what we're doing is not working. What we're doing is not creating a better school environment. So can we take a risk on trying something else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just the thing. Like you said, the risk. Everything's a risk. So like, let's look for the risk that's going to keep everyone safe, as safe as possible, at least, because there is a limit. Um, I also think too, when the conversation first started about arming the teachers, someone had brought up, what if you get that teacher who, they're already not getting paid a lot? Well, you got that one teacher that, you know, snaps.
Yeah, I've
Well,
documented about 100 cases over the last 60 years that involve teachers, and they've been wild. There have been teachers that barricaded in their classrooms. There was a teacher who was going to get fired, so he lit the school on fire and then shot himself. There have been domestics between teachers where, especially in small communities, everybody's married to somebody in that. And if somebody's sleeping with somebody else's wife and they all work at the same school, that can turn into a shooting in a classroom, a shooting in a break room. So just, yeah, I mean, in general, I don't think this should be a political point, but deadly weapons increase the risk to everybody in the area of that deadly weapon. And for kids, it increases the risk even more greatly. I just did an episode of my show with the CEO of Children's Hospital in Minneapolis. He was actually a pediatric trauma surgeon in DC back in the 90s when it was murder capital. And with kids, when your body's even smaller and when your organs have different proportions compared to your body, a gunshot injury is even more likely to be fatal to a child. So we need to be thinking about risk in a lot of different circumstances. And if you have a deadly weapon, there's a risk of somebody getting hurt or killed. And if there's a child in the vicinity of that deadly weapon, there's an even higher risk of that person getting, killed. So I think one of the things about jiu-jitsu is it teaches you respect. It teaches you time. It teaches you that you have to put work into being able to be able to control and beat someone. And if people don't understand that, you think that a gun gives you power, and you think, which is true, a gun gives anyone the power to kill someone else. It gives a 6-year-old kid the power to try to kill his teacher, in Virginia 2 years ago. But if you're getting to that point, it's probably because you've never had the exposure and the discipline to learn what it really takes to master something. What it really takes, it takes every week effort if you want to be out on the mats dominating everybody who's there in the gym. And we've got to find ways to give, I think, not just kids, but adults more exposure to that, because I think that I think a lot of people wouldn't pull the trigger in a stupid situation or wouldn't carry a gun into a stupid situation. Like all these bar fights that turn into a shooting. If you just had a little more respect for yourself, for life, for time, for effort, for discipline, you would never put yourself in a situation where somebody gets killed.
Absolutely. Um, I remember back in high school, um, like I was what, class of '97, so this was a couple years before Columbine, I believe.
Yeah, it was
Um,
99.
and but there are always like whispers of like someone shooting up school, coming in with guns into the school. Always whispers. One kid actually, and I think this kind of got a little blown out of proportion. A kid had a lighter in school, and he kept flicking the lighter under the desk. And then the rumors went flying that that kid was trying to burn down the school. You have even these situations too where whispers come about, and then there's the growing concern. Yes, if you hear something, you should still, you know, preemptively, approach it. Not necessarily like aggressively, not with a weapon or anything, but you still want to, you know, talk to the parents. You know, talk to the guidance counselor. Talk to There's so many steps to get there. And actually, listening to one of your episodes, I think it was on Freakonomics. Uh, you were all talking about that. It was just like, if one of the things were done in that long chain, this can all be prevented. And even just, when I think it's like, yeah, like at the very least, the parents take it serious. Guidance counselor someone take it serious. Maybe we can avoid getting to the bigger issue, but maybe we're just a long way away from, because there's so many people, so many schools. When you're doing these things on a larger scale, it is tough.
Yeah, I think we don't have to get stuck in these feelings of saying a problem is too big. Like a much bigger problem is fights that are occurring in schools. Like in DC, in Baltimore, like if you look at the local news, like there are fights in these schools all the time. And so if kids are going to be fighting anyway in the hallway, why don't you give them an opportunity to fight safely? Why don't you give them an opportunity in the discipline to, if you have to roll with somebody you don't like and you have to do technique with them for half an hour during gym class, is that conflict just going to get squashed right there? And that's where we need more out of the box thinking, because we've gotten into this situation where we say, because of the Constitution, we can't do anything about guns. Because of lawyers, we can't do anything about somebody potentially getting hurt. Because of the teachers union, we can't do anything with mandating this extra training the teachers go to. Like, you at some point you just have to tear things down to their fundamentals and say, like, okay, we have groups of kids that are fighting on a regular basis. We can't do any of these things to stop it. We can't do anything to stop one of them from bringing a gun to that fight one day, because that's what happens about 300 times a year in a school. Is there's a fight that escalates into a shooting. That's the most common situation. So if you can't do anything about those three factors, why don't we think outside of the box? Give these kids a way to fight. Give these kids a situation where they're in close contact with each other. Give you know it. I hate to sound like I'm trying to be like some sort of jiu-jitsu saves the world prophet, but it really can help people deal with conflicts. It can help people deal with stress, and it can help people deal with tension between groups and peers. And if those things are really the source of why fights or stabbings or shootings or bullying or teenage suicides are happening, then why don't we try something different to address them?
Yeah, a teammate and I had an altercation online. We didn't see eye to eye on the situation that was going on in the media several years back, and my concern was, It's like, I mean, we got to train together, and I don't want there to be any weird tension. Um, and we ended up shortly after that pairing up, drilling, spar, and we got our frustrations out, and then we talked afterward. Now, granted, we are adults in this scenario, but that is an example that I saw, and I felt really good about it. And we're not the best of friends now, but we're pretty good friends. At this point, despite our disagreements, it wasn't like the disagreement was like anything where we should be mad and want to fight each other over. But it's one of those things where it's like there is something that could have turned into something ugly potentially. I would hope not, but I see that also, like you said, with kids, if they're going to fight anyway, put them in there. Like, and honestly, they'll probably end up, when you go through something hard together, you grow together, you grow closer. I mean, that was Bill Parcells with the Giants. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to make
How
these
many
guys love
people
each
on the
other by
football
hating
team?
me.
Yeah. How many people who are on the football team or on the basketball team get into a fight with each other in the hallway? And they probably have all of the same pieces to have a conflict that a random set of 10 students would. Maybe they're in different neighborhoods, maybe they're different socioeconomic status, maybe they like, different teams, whatever. But once you give people some common ground, things come together. And once you give people an outlet, a lot of things don't escalate. I think in my 20s, especially, jujitsu was really helpful to be able to have a purpose that I'm getting through the workday because I've got somewhere that I want to be at 5 o'clock. So I'm not firing off some random email at, the person that annoyed me in this meeting or like was tasking all their work off at me. Whenever I don't have time with that, I'm going to deal with my stuff because I've got to get out the door to something that's more important. And I think that that's something that's missing kind of more and more from whether it's kids or adults in general, is if you don't have something that you're kind of working for every day, and it needs to be something that's more intense than just going to jazzercise or whatever, like in the evening. It's got to be something that you obsess about and you think about and shapes the way that you're going to interpret situations or engage in conflicts. Because like I'm not getting in a random argument with a coworker because that doesn't matter. Like that matters so little compared to what I'm going to spend a couple hours later on, working out.
Yeah. I think really at the end of the day, it's like, look, man, just keep moving forward and hustle. you know, Mind your business. As far as the jiu-jitsu community and us all as practitioners and I guess ambassadors, for the art, um, what's something that you think that we as an overall could do to, potentially help somehow, some way in this matter, if there's a way?
I think it would be, first, if you have kids, which I think probably everybody who's deep into jujitsu, if they have kids, like they've got them training. But talk to other parents, talk to other neighbors, just try to tell people about just the importance of having goals, having discipline, having regular activity, having physical activity. I think there's been a lot that's been written and researched about the lack of touch in our society and the way that the lack of physical touch makes people feel further and further from other people in society. And the more disconnected you are, the more likely you're going to be able to commit violence against somebody. Like it takes incredible mental effort and pretty profound trauma and crisis for somebody to kill an intimate partner or to kill a family member or spouse. But when violence is targeting strangers, it's because you don't have respect. The person shooting doesn't have respect for those victims as a person, doesn't feel that they're connected, that they're on the same team in the same place. So, something that happens when you're doing jujitsu, when you're close to people, like you're understanding the humanity of another person, and that's probably similar to basketball has kind of some parallels when you're bumping against people inside, fighting for rebounds. Football certainly has that, but those aren't sports that are scalable to everyone kind of throughout their life. But this is something that can be. I mean, I'm almost 40 and I'm going to stay with this for a while, but if you can get just a couple other people to take the journey with you, if you can get a kid who maybe just came out of football, maybe he's at your job, maybe he's at your church, and you can tell that he's kind of lost, and you can say like, hey, there's something that might be right for you right now. Get some people engaged that are kind of floating at the fringe, and then they're not going to be at the fringe anymore.
I have a buddy who I definitely want to play that part of the podcast for. Um, he he's been interested in at least trying Muay Thai with us. So, I always think that an activity like this, whether it's jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, taekwondo, whatever it may be, um, goes a long way in helping build that respect for others and for yourself. So,
Yeah, and those
definitely.
sports, are cool. My shins hurt thinking about a couple Muay Thai classes, and my jaw still hurts thinking about my one boxing match. But what there is something different about jujitsu from any of those others, which is being buried in somebody's side control, really having to work your way out of a bad position, feeling knee on belly, and just feeling like their knees touching the mat, and you're just losing air and your diaphragm's crushed. Like there there needs to be some of that physical helplessness to build the respect for other people. And I think that that's one of the issues, is that people don't respect somebody because they don't realize how powerful they can be. And if everybody's always at arm's length, or if somebody's looking down a gun barrel instead of rolling with you on the sidewalk, you're never respecting somebody else's power.
Fair enough. I'm going to still use Muay Thai as that way to get him into jiu-jitsu, his gateway drug.
Yeah, until he gets kicked in the shin 10 times and he never comes back to Muay Thai.
Oh, I hit shins once, and that was like, I think I separated my ribs, and I was like, well, I can't do jiu-jitsu for a little while, so I'm gonna try Muay Thai. And I collided shins once, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna risk my ribs.
Yeah,
Like, it's not worth it.
I was
But
holding pads for my buddy, and I thought my teeth were gonna fall out because he's kicking the pads so hard. Like, I got no interest in the striking sports whatsoever.
I'm gonna go back with my buddy just for a little while because he said he'd only do it if I come in with him, so I'm gonna go in with him just so he gets that comfort. In a second, I can get away. I'm like, because kicking the heavy bag, with like the burnouts at the end, 1 minute just hitting the heavy bag, just my shins were just on, and then I had jiu-jitsu right after, like immediately after. My shins were on fire. I was like, you know what? I don't know that this is for me. Why am I doing this anyway? I really love jiu-jitsu. I was just doing it for an extra workout, burn some extra calories, but do I really need to burn that many more? Nah, we're good. Um, but yeah. So David, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up there, my friend. Thank you very much for doing this, and just sharing your insight, and just sitting down and having a conversation with me. I would definitely love to have you back on, because as we're talking sports, and there's like, oh, like we're talking sports now. We're getting to specific stats and everything on Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, and everything. So we'd love to have you back on as a guest. Before we get out of here, are there any shout outs or mentions that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, if anybody wants to find out more about school shootings, warning, it's a really depressing, dark subject, but I write quite a bit about it. You can check out K through 12 school shooting database. If you look it up on Google, it's the first thing that comes out. I have the weekly Back to School Shootings podcast. Almost everybody on the show is either a PhD or a physician, or a kind of high level official who's working in this space. And then I publish articles every week on Substack on school shooting data analysis and reports. And that, if you have a kid in school, if you just want to know what's going on, there's a lot of information there about news, about recent incidents, about trends and data analysis. So yeah, that's all out there and it's all free.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put the links in the show notes so everybody have a quick direct get to for it, and make sure to tag you as well in the show notes.
For sure. And Dante, thank you so much for being a great ambassador to this sport and having really interesting discussions with people. I just found out about your show recently, but I've listened to a bunch of episodes of it. And I think that, you're really doing an important thing to socialize people, to kind of demystify what this sport is, and then to tell the stories of like how many really unique people are doing this for lots of different reasons.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Just want, people to, know other people's stories, because we're all in this for different reasons. So definitely always want to make sure that, people get the share that if they do so desire. So thank you.
All right. Until next time, Dante.
Yes, sir. And as always, to the listeners, thank you. If y'all got any questions, concerns, criticisms, feel free to reach out. You can find me at bjj.wiki on Instagram and also Off the Mats Podcast on Instagram. I wanted to give a real quick shout out to my crew over at Nerd Rage Radio, Bobby, Chris, Joe, Maryland, Phil, Ricky, Tiki, all of them. I'm saying it fast this time because y'all hear it every week, so y'all know who they are. If it wasn't for Nerd Rage Radio, I wouldn't be doing a podcast. So thank you very much to those guys for getting me started. And I got to go over there and make another appearance. It's been a minute, so I got to go hang out with my guys. Also want to give another shout out to my other podcast. So You Like Horror. If you like scary movies, go check that out. We are talking about remakes and originals, how they compare to each other, which ones, different ones throughout the year. So go tune in. We're going to be talking about the Amityville, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Psycho, Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead even. So we got quite a few. And we just had Nosferatu released in theaters back at Christmas time. So we slipped that one onto the schedule as well. So we're going to have some discussions on those throughout the year. So definitely go check it out. It's So You Like Horror on Instagram, all the words separated by underscores. And if you want the podcast, it's wherever you're listening to this at. You can find it there too. And last but not least, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to our guest here, Mr. David Riedman. Thank you so much for your information, your time, and just having a great conversation here. I do appreciate it. And I feel like I definitely pulled a lot from this today. So thank you for that. And as always, to you guys, again, we love you. Thank you so much. You know what it is. You guys keep listening. We're going to definitely keep making these shows. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Deeper with it. Now let me sing a song.